Earlier this year, while we were preparing for the Colorado trip, I began to realize that the Jeep was not going to be a wise vehicle to take out there. So, you know, it was obvious I needed to get something else. I chose the landcruiser, or the LX470, for several reasons. It took a long time to get there. And the only reason the landcruiser won out was because of size, because I do have 3 kids, and it has the 2 seats in the back for an optional 3rd row if you want it. And with the family of 5, there's a lot of gear that comes along with it. The landcruiser had the towing capacity. It had the V8, which I really like. The specific 2006 had an extra speed in the transmission, so I like that for towing. And it still is a well-known off-road vehicle. And those were the main deciding factors in getting it. But with those things, those positives, also came some negatives. My favorite thing about it is the size. My least favorite thing about it is the size. Especially here in Kentucky, there's a lot of trees along the trail, a lot of brush, and some of the trails are really, really tight. I got to experience that firsthand here recently. This is a lot wider vehicle. It's also a lot heavier vehicle. So I noticed it was harder to get up some obstacles because I'm probably weighing 2 to 3 times more than what the Jeep did. In the back, there's a feature that the landcruiser and LX470 has that I don't think any other SUV from this era has, and that is the tailgate. Now there are plus and minuses, but for me, I love it. It gives me a place to sit, a place to prepare things, and there's also a modification you can get that puts storage inside the tailgate. I plan on doing it so I can keep my recovery gear inside the tailgate at all times and relieve me from carrying one of the boxes. Now a downside is it keeps you from being able to reach as far into the back. You know, you lose about 1.5 feet, so there are times I've had to climb up in here where I might not have if it wasn't for the tailgate. But for me, it's definitely a plus. Lexus and Toyota both are known for their reliability. You know, they're not unbreakable, but they don't break often. You know, I'm not a Toyota guy, and because of that, this is the first Toyota I've owned, and everybody that has a landcruiser seems to be a fanatic or a fanboy or whatever you call it. And I love it, but I think they make it out to be more invincible than it really is. At the end of the day, this is still a 12-year-old vehicle, and there are going to be repairs and upkeep that you have to take, and because it is a landcruiser, they can be a little more expensive. And I think when I bought it, I thought I was buying a bulletproof vehicle because they really do make it sound that way. And now that I own it, I know what they're talking about. You know, more than likely, with proper maintenance, this engine will go 500,000 miles, maybe more. All vehicles won't do that. I was specifically looking for this model because it came with a DVD player. And for me, that's a necessity for long road trips with the kids. Unfortunately, it was a poor design. The actual DVD player itself is in the main back in the cargo area. And if the rear seat is in and in a stored position, you can't even get to it. This makes it almost impossible for a child to be able to change the DVD while we're driving. Whereas if the DVD player was up front, it would be easy for my wife or I or the kids to change the DVD. One of the main things that I wanted when I was looking for a vehicle is something that would be comfortable to ride. We were planning a 19-day trip, and we've got plenty other long trips in mind. And I didn't want something that was uncomfortable. Previous vehicles I've owned have, not been that comfortable to go on long trips with, and the Lexus really seemed to fit that bill. The interior is top of the line. It's like sitting on your couch while you're driving. I've got the AHC, which is a hydraulic suspension, which even the worst washboard roads, it made it so smooth. Because of that, I didn't need to purchase a lift. With a push of a button, I can raise or lower it 3 inches. Now one of the downsides of that is there's a weight limit with it. I actually overloaded the AHC on our trip and had to redistribute the weight on top to try to put as much weight forward as possible. And I've since found out that you can get heavier springs in the back and adjust the torsion bar up front to make up for that difference. So it was a little bit my fault for not knowing, but also it's something that you need to consider if you're going to get one, that if you're going to carry heavy loads, that you're going to have to adjust that some, or plan on riding in low mode. while the AHC gives you great ground clearance, the way they mounted the hitch on these gives you a poor departure angle. Now I'm looking at a way to modifying this to put the hitch to where it comes out through the bumper. When I was towing a trailer, that was by far my limiting factor. Another thing that really attracted me to the Land Cruiser and the Lexus is how quiet it is inside. The insulation on them, it's almost unbelievable. I don't know if you'll be able to hear a difference here, but don't know if the camera will pick up on that, but we've got wind noise right now from the roof rack, and when you close it, it goes completely away. Before I installed the aftermarket roof rack, it was completely quiet in here. One of the downsides with all Land Cruisers after 98, I believe, is that they have independent front suspension. Now that makes for a nice ride. It's very comfortable. Some downsides that come along with it is I can only lift it so much, and the size tire you can fit is the same whether you add a lift or not. Somewhere between 33 and 35 inches is the largest tire you can put on it, and about 3 to 4 inches is as much as you can lift it. The other downside is off-road, it doesn't have the flex that a straight axle would have, and so I lift the front tires a lot off the ground. Luckily it has a track, so when one of the tires lifts, it breaks that tire and the other one gets traction. It's not as good as lockers. I was impressed with how well it did, but I do see lockers in my future, but because I'm daily driving this, I'll have to get either air or electric locker. One thing I was really looking for in a vehicle is something I could buy and with very little modifications be able to use it off-road. A little bit of that was time constraint, but also I kind of like the looks of a stock vehicle. The LX470, I put new tires on it, all terrains, because it had street tires on it, and that was it. I could have been done at that point. Now I chose to take the running boards off, one because I hate the way they look, and it gives me a little bit more clearance. But then also I added a front runner roof rack. Not a necessity to go off-road, but it did make it easier, for carrying gear. The Land Cruiser 100 series and LX470 has a decent aftermarket support. Now, you will pay more for it because at the end of the day, there are not as many Land Cruisers out there as there are Wranglers, for instance. But because these are well-known off-road vehicles, anything you could want for it, there is aftermarket support to do it with. So, a big downside to Land Cruisers that seems to never be mentioned until you purchase one, and you realize that every new purchaser finds it out, is how poor the fuel economy is. Now, I personally believe that's a trade-off. Toyotas are known to not have the best fuel economy, but they're also known to be the most reliable, and I think that is where the engineers went with that. But I will say this, while pulling my trailer, going 80 miles an hour on the interstate, I was getting 5 to 6 miles per gallon. On a normal day, if I'm driving, as a daily driver, I get around 12 to 13 miles per gallon. They also suggest premium fuel. I haven't always put that in, but a lot of the problems that have been known with these, they blame it on the use of regular fuel. I'm not sure if that is the case or not, but when you add that cost of low fuel economy along with expensive fuel, it can be pretty expensive to drive. So there is definitely a Toyota tax, and if you become into more modern, the mid-2000s, there's quite a bit of Toyota tax. The good thing is, though, when you go to sell it, if you sell it, you get that back. But I think one thing about once you buy a Land Cruiser is you don't get rid of it. You end up keeping it for many years. I expect to keep this for 10 to 20 years.